Hello, delighted to be here today with Anisha Raghavan, Chief Marketing Officer, Global Brand Americas for Walgreens Boots Alliance. Welcome. Before we get started, can you tell our audience a bit about your extraordinary career and what you're now focused on at WBA?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Laurent. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for joining.
Well, actually, I started my career at WPP working at Gray Advertising, and I had worked on mostly CPG clients, so clients like Procter and Gamble. And then after my MBA, I spent quite a bit of time at Unilever and PepsiCo, so got a true foundation in CPG brand management. But I had also along the way been very interested and fascinated, determined to learn, quite frankly, all things digital as digital technology was starting to rise. And so I took a few head of marketing roles in direct-to-consumer beauty brands as well. And so if you look at my career, I was sort of switching back and forth between big companies and small companies, CPG companies and direct-to-consumer companies. And I equally loved them all. And I always thought that I would have to keep moving companies to be able to work in all of those different kinds of environments. But then I got the call for this Walgreens Boots Alliance role. And it was like being a kid in a candy store. I got all of those things in one role. So, a lot of people know the Walgreens name or know the Boots name, but what people don't realize is there's this internal CPG company that has historically been called Global Brands Group. And we actually just relaunched the company to be called the number 7 beauty company. Yeah. And so this internal group has, nearly 10 beauty brands. Some are iconic brands like number 7 and Soap and Glory. Others are newer or just launching. And this portfolio of beauty brands is what I look after in the US. And we're super excited because we've got a huge growth trajectory ahead of us. And the brands operate in CPG, but also some of them have DTC models as well. So for me, it's just the perfect job.
Yeah, very exciting. And thanks for the partnership throughout. I just want to touch a little bit on this last year. I mean, commerce has, of course, evolved tremendously over the last year during COVID, accelerated by COVID. And what do you see when you think about the future, the most transformational developments to come from this experience? I mean, can you maybe talk a little bit about WBA's strategic shift during this period, during this time?
Yeah, I mean, talk about transformation. Yeah. It's been 8 to 10 years of transformation in just a year, right? So we at WBA, we've done a lot to adapt, as many companies have. So for us, what was really important was, number one, speed, and allowing consumers to have the convenience and the speed that they needed along with the safety. So from a safety perspective, really expediting things like curbside pickup or click and collect. Like many retailers, we advanced a lot of that transformation that was already happening. And from a speed perspective, another example is on the My Walgreens app. You can now, in some markets, order and pick up in as little as 30 minutes. And so just really allowing consumers to safely still shop, but do so with convenience and speed, and kind of always being at the forefront of that. And across all Walgreens Boots Alliance divisions, we have also had a real commitment to, something that actually has been a mantra in marketing since the digital age started, which was meeting consumers where they are. Yeah. And really allowing consumers to connect with the brand in a way that's personalized to them. And so we have been on this journey of digital transformation since before COVID even started. That's allowed us to have a strategy around mass personalization at scale. And so I'm happy to dive more into that because it is a huge part of our strategy. And at number 7 beauty company as well, something we've taken advantage of and seen great results from.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on that point actually. I mean, in terms of going maybe beyond transactions and beyond the point of sale, how do you, based on what you just said, how do you see the role of personalized commerce experiences? I mean, how do they play in that?
Yeah. Well, so the digital transformation, I'll start there because you have to enable mass personalization. And so, like I said, we've been on this digital transformation journey for, a while now, a couple of years and well before COVID, which meant ensuring the right tech stack. And so implementing MarTech, ensuring the right talent in-house. And so either upskilling our talent, we had put all 1,000 marketers through a really intensive digital training program, or hiring the right talent from the outside. And then it's also about, the right partnership. So you guys at WPP have worked really closely with us to ensure that our first party data is as rich as possible and that we're able to deepen our monetization of it with things like building an identity graph. And so at Number 7 Beauty Company, I'll speak to how we've used first party data, but it is, like I said, a strategy across all of WBA. But at the Number 7 Beauty Company, being a CPG company, we actually have a huge advantage that we're owned by retail companies. And then we have access to first party data that most CPG companies don't have access to. So we've really used that to our advantage. And over the last year to 2 years, connected the plumbing between our CPG brands and our retail divisions so that we can access that first party data. And what we do is, we ingest that first party data into our media with addressable media channels like addressable TV or social media. So if I'm trying to target lapsed users for one of my brands, I can use that first party data with the known knowledge that that is truly a lapsed user and what their purchase behavior was or where did they go after lapsing out of my brand, and target them in addressable media. We also use that first party data for content creation and making sure that we're serving really personalized content to the consumer. So for example, just to really make it a basic sort of explanation, we have cohorts of consumers. So we segment our consumers based on purchase behavior. So if you, Laurent, are someone who has dry skin and you're really motivated to purchase based on peer reviews, we might be serving you content that is 100% 5-star reviews for a product. Whereas if I'm someone who's motivated to purchase by the science and the claims, then I might get served an ad that is about the efficacy of the product or the claims behind them. So that's another way that first party data has been used to our advantage. And since we started our journey towards mass personalization at scale, we've seen tremendous results. Just as an example, our Soap and Glory brand has quadrupled its sales and seen a return on ad spend that's 2.5 times what it was before, since we started ingesting this first party data.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. Thanks for that. And I'll come back to data and digital. I'm going to try and extract you from the digital world just for a minute, and if possible, is that even possible? Let's talk a little bit about physical retail. I mean, the role of physical seems to be transforming rapidly too, anchored maybe less in the immediate purchase and more in the experience. And I'm interested in what advantage you think WBA have with physical stores versus potentially new entrants who are only online.
Yeah. Well, so at WBA, everything is omni-channel. And if mass personalization is our true North Star, we have to be able to understand consumers' need for e-commerce versus their need for in-store, versus their need for everything in between, like consultations and tutorials, for example. And so we have, again, I'll speak from the standpoint of Number 7 Beauty Company, and beauty is a huge part of Walgreens' business as well. We have seen data that shows that pre-COVID times, 80% of sales for beauty products were happening in the store. And even for really digitally savvy consumer groups like Gen Z audiences or millennial audiences, that number was still as high as 60%, 65%. And so in-store plays a huge role in the beauty industry. And consumers, I think, are always, even in a post-COVID world, they're going to want to try on products. They're going to want to have that relationship with the beauty advisors that both Walgreens and Boots provides to people, and get their questions answered and things like that. But no doubt there's going to be change after COVID is over. Some of these behaviors that online retailers or online only brands have experienced, that growth in e-commerce is going to stick. The behavior of things like curbside pickup or shopping online and e-commerce growth is going to stay as well. And so I think it's just, it's important that brands adapt, and WBA has. And so there's many examples of that, but for instance, WBA has removed physical circulars and moved to digital circulars, and that's helped, not hurt the business. We've also in store with those beauty advisors, because not as many people were coming into store during COVID, we've moved to virtual consultations. And so a consumer can scan a QR code and get a virtual consultation with a beauty advisor. On the number 7 DTC site, we have a diagnostic tool where consumers can get a recommendation on what products are best for their skin. So this continuous adaptation, I think, is one of Walgreens Boots' advantages, where we're strong on the physical store side with our beauty consultants and things like that, but we're also very adaptive on the online side.
Yeah, so we've covered digital, we've covered omnichannel. Let's dive a little bit into the value exchange. It's not always about currency. There are other things that matter: social, environmental impact, for example. Or you've touched on it a bit already, but personalized experiences. How do you see that evolving? This notion of value exchange. Quite interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could talk about there, so I'll stick to one of those topics, which is social impact. It's no longer an option for any company, for any brand to have social impact on their agenda. It is absolutely table stakes, that it's expected by consumers, especially in the last year with everything that's happened, from Black Lives Matter to Stop Asian Hate, COVID and all those sort of things. It's the responsibility of companies to have a social impact. And so one example that I feel really proud of personally, it was sort of my baby within Walgreens Boots, is called Unstoppable Together. And we worked on this with your team at WPP. So the number 7 brand is one of our biggest beauty brands within number 7 Beauty Company. It's an iconic brand in the UK, number 1 in skincare. And in the US, it's newer, but very fast growing. And so the brand has been around for 86 years and has always had this mission around helping women when they're stopped in their tracks and being the ally to unstoppable women. And during COVID, we started noticing data that showed that women were severely disproportionately impacted by the job losses that were happening during COVID. So 4 times more women were losing or leaving their jobs than men. And that was because, number 1, women are more disproportionately or have a higher representation in industries that were impacted by COVID. So the hospitality industry, for example, or the education industry. And the second reason is women were still, we're still expected to be the primary caregiver. And so when kids were staying home from schools or daycares, it's either expected that the woman's the one that stays home with the child, or the woman is still making significantly less than the man. And so if you're having a conversation with your spouse on who's going to stay home, it's often the person that makes less. And so as a result of all of these things, there was just a huge loss of women in the workforce, where we have lost about 30 years of progress. So number 7, having this mission for so many years around helping women when they've been stopped in their tracks, we launched this campaign called Unstoppable Together in January. And we started with a film that was created by your team, where we wanted to really raise awareness that the She Session, which is what this has been coined, was even happening. And that did its job. We had 21-something million views on that film, and really ignited a conversation. And about a month later, Vice President Kamala Harris called it a national emergency that the She Session was happening. So we're proud that we ignited that conversation. And we also held this job summit that was the largest of its kind in February, and we had iconic speakers like Ariana Huffington and Maria Shriver and Kate Walsh, as well as lesser known but equally authoritative people such as Minda Harts, who's an author on how to secure your seat as a woman of color at an executive table. And so we had these inspirational speakers. We had resources and tips, practical tips like how to interview. And we invited everyone who wanted to come. So we had over almost 9,000 people register. We did individual coaching sessions a month later in March, and we had over 1,000 people take advantage of that. So we impacted more than 10,000 careers, which I'm so proud of, considering how substantial the impact of the She Session has been. And so that's an example where, the social impact was really authentic to us as a brand. Like I said, we've been doing this for 86 years, and it's in our DNA to have that mission of empowering women, but also very timely. The She Session was, not even really being talked about when we started looking into this, and now it's all over the news. And so we feel just really proud of that impact.
Yeah, and I agree, not an option anymore to not look at things like that. So totally agree. You've used the word insight a little bit and a few times, and I just want to sort of dial back into that a little bit and talk a bit about how what your plans are to derive even better insight from data. And I suppose the backdrop is, we are entering a cookieless world. We have iOS 14 forthcoming, and so on and so forth. So maybe touch a little bit on how your strategy for drawing amazing insight, because data without amazing insight isn't really worth it. So talk a bit about that, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And our data, we are committed to being a data-driven modern marketing company. That is our goal and what we've been marching towards. And you're right, with the the iOS changes that are coming up, where consumers are going to be able to opt in or opt out of their data being used. That impacts companies like social media platforms to be able to serve data in the way that we are used to as marketers, and also the cookieless world that's coming. And so it's hugely important. And we use data or obtain data and insights from lots of different places. So of course we have our traditional insights where we're doing market research. We have social media listening tools and things like that. But really our first party data is the crux of where our strength lies to be able to face some of these challenges that are coming in the industry. And so what our focus is not just having that first party data, because a lot of companies have lots of data and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So really trying to organize that data, be able to monetize that data, and structure it in a way that is really useful. And that's where, again, I mentioned the work that we're doing with you at WPP around creating this identity graph. And another example is going beyond the first party data, but really thinking about zero party data. And how do we organize ourselves in a way where, number one, consumers trust us as a brand, and number two, then we're able to build zero party data where we're directly asking the consumer and they're directly answering to us a question, and we're able to develop insights that way. So we're just in the middle of figuring out the best way forward around something like zero party data, but I think we're well set up at WBA to be able to leverage our strengths and leverage our approach to data to be able to face some of these challenges that the industry has coming.
Yeah, totally agree. Anisha, we're coming to time. I just really want to thank you. You've been amazing. So much. We could talk for hours, I think. So many insights, and so many ideas. I just want to end on a note. At WPP, we're driven by our values of open, optimistic, and extraordinary. And I thought I'd just ask you to lay out a reason for optimism in the year ahead, just to end on.
The reason for optimism. I mean, I have lots of reasons for optimism. So I think, one of them is more on the internal side of being a leader inside a company. And what I have seen over the past year gives me so much optimism in terms of the speed and focus that companies like WBA can have to really transform themselves. And that requires focus and great leadership. It requires all the teams on the ground to be committed and passionate about what they're doing. And we've seen that. So I'm so grateful to our army of people at our company that worked tremendously hard, and what we've seen them be able to do in a really short time. So that gives me optimism. But at the same time, the other side of that optimism is the empathy that's come over the last year, where we've seen people with their children in the background, we've seen their houses, and I think there's just a greater level of understanding, as the industry is talking about, around what flexible work really means. And all companies, I'm sure ours included, are talking about what that future office kind of environment looks like, and really being, having a sharper sort of edge towards empathy on different needs to manage your work-life balance. So that gives me optimism. And then on the consumer side, the transparency and the continuous push to be transparent with consumers, that gives me optimism as well. And so while some of the stuff around the cookieless world and all of that, as a marketer presents challenges, I think that's where the industry needs to head. And I think that, that trust building with the consumer is of critical importance. And so the fact that we're being pushed on transparency and on privacy and things like that, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in transparency and your empathy point. So thank you for raising it. Thank you again for joining us today. You've been fantastic, and thanks for the partnership. Thanks, Anisha.
Yeah, thank you as well. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.